The girl was 9, maybe 10, and she was the only one who moved. The crosswalk light had just turned. The crowd stepped off the curb the way crowds always do, together, automatic, without thinking. But the man with the silver cane did not step with them. He stepped a half-second late, at the wrong angle, toward the lane where a delivery truck was still rolling through on a yellow that had long since gone red. Nobody stopped. People had places to be. The girl stopped. She was carrying a paper bag with the top folded down and a tear along one side, and she dropped it without looking at it and grabbed the man's coat sleeve with both hands and pulled. He stumbled. She pulled harder. The truck passed close enough that the draft moved his hair. He stood on the curb, breathing. The girl stood next to him, still holding his sleeve. "Sir," she said. He turned his face toward her voice. He wore dark glasses, even though the sky was overcast and gray. His cane was white, the kind with the red tip, and his hand around it had gone rigid. "Sir, are you okay?" He said nothing for a moment, just breathed. "Yes," he said finally. "Thank you." His voice was the kind that had given orders for a long time. Even at rest, it had that quality, measured, accustomed to being heard. But right now it was shaking in a way he could not entirely control. The girl picked up her bag. The fold had come undone and she could see inside, a loaf of bread and a can of something, and a small container of orange juice that had rolled to the side. She refolded the top as best she could. "Do you need help getting somewhere?" she asked. The man turned his face toward her again. He had a strong jaw and white hair and the kind of deep-set lines that come from years of squinting at things that couldn't be fixed. "Where are you going?" he asked. She glanced down the block. "Nowhere fast." He almost smiled. It came and went too quickly to be sure. "I need to get to Meridian Street," he said. "The building with a copper awning." "Do you know it?" She did not know it. But she looked in the direction he'd been facing when he stepped off the curb, which was the wrong direction entirely. "That's the other way," she said. "I know," he said. Then, after a pause, "I thought I knew." She shifted the bag to her other arm. "I can take you. You don't have to." "I know," she said. She held out her arm the way she'd seen people do in movies, elbow bent, offered like a question. He found it with his hand without her having to say anything, and they started walking. His name was Ellison Barr. She did not know this yet. She found out the way she found out most things, by paying attention. A man at the door of the copper awning building said, "Mr. Barr," when they came up the steps, and said it the way people say names when the name means something to them, with a small straightening of the spine. Ellison stopped on the top step and turned his face back toward the street, toward where the girl was already starting to leave. "Wait," he said. She stopped. "What is your name?" she told him. Her name was Willa Crane. "Willa," he said. "Thank you. You already said that." "I know. I'm saying it again." She looked at the door, at the man standing beside it, at the polished stone floor she could see just inside. She looked at Ellison Barr, who was 71 years old, and had been a corporate attorney for 40 years before his vision failed, and who had, in the last 8 months, learned to navigate most of the route from his apartment to this building and back again without too much difficulty, and who had made a single mistake this morning, because the construction, scaffolding on the corner, had changed the echo the street usually made, and that one mistake would have cost him everything if a 9-year-old girl hadn't dropped her groceries and grabbed his coat. She did not know any of this either. "Okay," she said, and she left. He thought about her for 3 days. This was not something Ellison Barr did easily. He had spent his career learning to process, compartmentalize, move on. Sentiment was a luxury that slowed things down. He had been told this by his own father, and had spent most of his adult life proving it unnecessary. But he thought about the girl, the way she'd said nowhere fast. The paper bag with the folded top, the matter-of-fact way she'd offered her arm, like it was the obvious next step and she simply couldn't understand why it needed discussion. On the 3rd day, he asked Gerald, the man at the door, if he knew anything about her. Gerald said he'd seen her before, in the neighborhood. She usually sat on the bus bench at the corner of 5th and Meridian in the late afternoons, eating something or just sitting. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't think she lived anywhere specific. Ellison stood very still for a moment when Gerald said this. "How long have you seen her there?" he asked. "Few weeks," Gerald said. "Maybe longer." Ellison said nothing else. He went upstairs to his office, which was no longer an office in any working sense. Just a room with a desk he knew the shape of and shelves he could navigate by feel, and a window he sat near because the light was warm, even if he couldn't see it. He thought about what it meant to be 9 years old and have nowhere specific to live. He had spent 40 years arguing about property, about ownership, about who had legal claim to what square footage of what building. He had won those arguments more often than he'd lost them. He had a very good memory for the law and a very poor memory for the human cost of applying it. He sat near the window for a long time. He went back to the corner at 4:30 the next afternoon. His assistant, a young man named Porter, who took the job seriously and worried too much, had offered to come. Ellison had said no. He knew the route well enough. The scaffolding had been partially removed, and the echo was almost back to what he expected. He found the bus bench. He found the edge of it with his cane and sat down on the end, closest to the street, and waited. He heard her before she sat down. A sound like something being dragged. A bag, he thought, or a backpack with something heavy in it. Then the particulars of someone sitting on a metal bench without wanting to make noise about it. "You came back," Willa said. "I did. Did you need help with something else?" He turned toward her voice. She was, he estimated, about 3 feet away. Maybe less. "No," he said. "I wanted to see how you were." A pause. "You can't see anything," she said. "Not unkindly. Just accurate. It's an expression." "I know. I was making a joke." He adjusted his grip on the cane. "Were you mostly?" He asked if she'd eaten. She said yes. He asked if that was true. Longer pause this time. "I had something this morning," she said. He stood up. "Come on then." She did not move. "Where?" "There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Booth's in the back." "They know me there." "Why do they know you there?" "Because I've been going there for 20 years. Another pause. He could hear her thinking about it. Or he imagined he could, which might not have been the same thing. "Okay," she said. At the diner, she ordered eggs and toast and a glass of milk, and then looked at the menu again and added bacon. He ordered coffee. The woman who brought it, her name was Ruth Ann, and she had been working there since before Ellison lost his sight, said, "The usual, mister," bar without needing to ask, and set the coffee exactly where his hand was resting. Willa watched this. "She knows where to put it," Willa said after Ruth Ann had gone. "She's been doing it for 8 months. She practiced. She practiced. She asked me what would be most helpful. I told her. She started doing it." Willa chewed this over along with her toast. "Did you ask her to practice, or did she just do it?" "She just did it." Willa looked toward the counter where Ruth Ann was refilling something. "That's nice," she said. "Yes," Ellison said. "It is," he asked her carefully, where she was staying. She told him, equally carefully, that she was between places. He did not push. He had spent enough years in depositions to know when a witness was giving him the most they were willing to give for now, and when pressing would close a door rather than open one. Instead, he asked her what she liked. She thought about this seriously, the way children do when they sense the question is real. "Books," she said, "when I can get to them. The library on Cressmore has those big ones with photographs. Animals, mostly. And maps. Maps of what? Any maps. I like seeing how things connect." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I used to read maps. Road atlases, mostly, when I was your age. Before everything was digital, what happened to them, the atlases? Still in a box somewhere, in the apartment. You kept them?" He paused. "Yes, even though you can't." She stopped. "Sorry. It's all right." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I kept them because I remember what they looked like, and sometimes that's enough." Willa sat with this for a moment. Then she ate the rest of her eggs. It took 2 more meetings before Ellison asked the question he'd been building toward since the day Gerald told him she had no specific address. They were at the diner again. She had ordered the same thing. He had come to understand. This was not a lack of imagination, but a form of reliability. When you don't control much, you hold on to what you can predict. "I have a spare room," he said. "It's been empty for 11 years. My daughter used it when she visited, before she moved to Portland. There's a bed and a window and a shelf. The shelf is empty." Willa set down her fork. "I'm not saying this to be strange," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I have a guest room with a lock on the door. You would have your own key. Porter, my assistant, comes by during the day. He's 26 and he talks too much, but he's trustworthy." Silence. "I don't need anything from you," he said. "In return, I want to be clear about that too." "Then why?" Willa asked. Ellison set down his coffee cup. He could hear the lunch crowd around them. The low noise of other people's conversations, silverware, someone laughing near the door. He had learned since losing his sight to pay a different kind of attention to sounds. The way it filled and shaped a space. The information it carried if you were patient with it. "Because I am old," he said. "And I have spent most of my life being good at things that didn't matter as much as I thought they did. And because 3 days after you pulled me off that street, I was still thinking about you. And in my experience, when you can't stop thinking about something, there's usually a reason." She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he said. "You don't. You don't know me either." "That's true. What if I take something? Or break something? Then I'll know more about you than I do now." She looked at him across the table. His hands were folded around his coffee cup. His face was turned slightly toward the sound of the kitchen, the way it sometimes drifted when he wasn't concentrating on pointing it at her. "The shelf is really empty," she said. "I'll have Porter put the road atlases on it," he said, "if you want." She didn't answer for right away. She finished her milk. She lined up her fork and knife the way she always did at the end of a meal, parallel to the plate's edge, without seeming to think about it. Ellison had noticed this the first time. He had noticed it because Porter had mentioned it to him afterward, and because it told him something about a child who imposed order carefully and quietly on whatever she touched. "Okay," she said finally. The apartment was on the 14th floor of a building on Meridian, 3 blocks from the copper awning. It was larger than she expected. Not huge, not the kind of large that shows off. Just the kind of large that accumulates over a long life of not moving very much. Books along every wall in the living room, organized in a system she didn't understand at first. A kitchen that smelled like coffee and old wood. Framed things on the walls that she'd have to get up close to read. Porter met her at the door. He was, as advertised, 26, and he did talk too much. A steady, nervous current of information that she quickly understood was not about filling silence, but about managing his own anxiety. He showed her the room. The bed had a blue blanket. The window looked out over the roofline of the building next door, and beyond that a sliver of the street. The shelf had 3 road atlases on it, large ones with cracked spines, and on the end of the shelf, someone had placed a small book about migratory birds, with photographs. She stood in the doorway looking at the shelf for a long time. Porter was explaining something about the bathroom lock. She wasn't listening. She went to the shelf and took down the bird book. She opened it to a page in the middle, a 2-page photograph of Arctic terns in flight, hundreds of them, white against a gray sky. She sat down on the edge of the bed with the book in her lap. From the living room, she could hear Ellison moving, the soft knock of his cane against the floor. The particular rhythm she was already starting to recognize, 3 steps, pause, turn, the sounds of someone who had learned a new map of a familiar space. She listened to it for a while. Then she closed the book carefully, the way you close something you intend to open again, and set it on the shelf where it had been. The first week was quiet, in the way first weeks are. Careful, everyone paying attention to where the edges were. Willa went to the library on Cressmore every afternoon, because this was her habit, and she saw no reason to change it. She came back before dinner, which Porter made on the nights Ellison didn't feel like going out. Ellison was a better cook than Porter, but less willing to admit it. The two of them had an ongoing argument about this that seemed to be less about cooking and more about something neither of them had named. She stayed out of the way when Ellison was working. He still took calls, not cases, not anymore, but consultations, people who wanted his opinion on things. He sat at the desk in the study, and his voice changed when he was on the phone, became harder-edged and precise, and Willa understood from this that the man at the diner and the man on the phone were the same man, but that the man on the phone had been doing that version of himself for much longer. He was not easy to know. He wasn't unkind. He didn't snap or dismiss her, but he existed inside a discipline she didn't have words for yet. A rigorous self-containment that she recognized because she had spent years developing her own and understood what it cost. She understood that it was something he had built to survive things he had not told her about. She did not ask. She began instead to leave small things. The first was without thinking about it. She was looking at one of the road atlases, and she found a page for Montana, and she noticed a highway route that connected 3 towns whose names she liked, and she set a pencil down across the page to mark it. And then she realized she'd marked up his book and felt a wash of alarm. She decided not to say anything and closed the atlas and put it back. 3 days later, Ellison was reaching for it. She heard him take it from the shelf. She heard him open it. She tensed. He said nothing. Later that evening, he came to the doorway of the living room, where she was reading the bird book on the couch. "Montana," he said. She looked up. "Those 3 towns," he said. "I drove that route, 1987, in a car with no air conditioning in August." She waited. "Flattest sky I ever saw," he said. "Went on in every direction. Did you like it?" He thought about this. "I didn't know how to like things slowly then. I was too busy getting somewhere." A pause. "I think I would like it more now." She looked back at the bird book. "Maybe someone could drive you." "Maybe," he said. He went back to the study. She heard the door not quite close behind him, which it always did when he was still thinking about something. Weeks passed. She got a library card. She brought books home. She stacked them on the shelf in an order that made sense to her, largest to smallest by the picture on the cover, which was not a system that would make sense to anyone else, but it was hers. Ellison asked her once what the system was. She explained it. He was quiet. "Show me," he said. She took his hand and brought it to the spines. She described each cover in order: the whale, the mountain, the orange sky, the faces, the bridge. His hand moved from spine to spine as she described them. "The bridge," he said. "What kind of bridge?" "Old. Stone. Over a river that's got mist on it." "What color is the mist?" "White, but the water under it looks dark." He stood with his hand on the spine for a moment. "That's in Scotland," he said. That bridge, I've seen a photograph of it. You remember photographs? I remember everything I saw before, he said. It doesn't go away. It just stops getting updated. She thought about this for a long time after he went to bed. She thought about what it would mean to have an entire world inside your head that no longer matched the world outside it. To carry a version of every face you knew from before, held perfectly still at the moment you last saw it. To know that the people in those images were changing, aging, moving, becoming different, and to have no way of updating the picture. She thought about her own mother, whose face she hadn't seen in 2 years, and about whether the image she carried was already wrong. She sat with that thought for a while. Then she got up and went to the kitchen and drank a glassel, standing at the sink, looking at the window and the dark outside it. Ellison's daughter called on a Wednesday evening in October. Her name was Priscilla. She called every 2 weeks, punctual as weather, and Ellison spoke to her from the study with the door most of the way closed. Willa had learned not to listen. It wasn't difficult. The conversations had a shape she recognized from the doorway. Formal affection, the kind between people who love each other and have stopped being able to say so simply. But this Wednesday, the door was further open than usual. Willa was on the couch with the bird book. She wasn't trying to hear. She heard anyway. Ellison's voice, measured as always, said, "She's a child. She needed somewhere to stay." A pause while Priscilla spoke. "No, I'm not Priscilla. I am not confused about what I'm doing." A longer pause. "What I'm telling you is that it's fine. Everything is fine." Another pause. "Because I'm not asking for your approval," he said. "I'm telling you how things are." Willa turned a page she hadn't read. The call ended. A few minutes later, she heard Ellison come into the hallway. His cane made the usual sound against the floor, but slower than usual. He stopped in the living room doorway. "Sorry," he said. "I wasn't listening," she said. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Of course you were." She turned another page. "She doesn't have to like it." "No," he said. "She doesn't." He came and sat in the chair across from the couch, which he did sometimes in the evenings, just sat there without saying much, the two of them existing in the same space. She had come to understand this was, for him, a form of company, that he did not need to be talking to be present. "She means well," he said after a while. "I know. She's worried about me. I know that too." He turned his face toward the window. The city lights were on, low and orange through the glass. "She was 12 when her mother died," he said. "I didn't handle it well. I worked. That was what I knew how to do. I worked, and she grew up in a house that was very quiet and very orderly and not very warm." He paused. "She turned out fine. She would tell you she turned out fine and she would be right. But she doesn't entirely trust that I know what care looks like. And I understand why she doesn't." Willa looked at the page in the bird book. A photograph of a lesser flamingo, pink against an African lake. "You know what it looks like now," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm learning what it looks like," he said. "There's a difference." She considered this. "That's okay, though," she said. "Learning is okay." He didn't say anything. After a while, Porter texted from his phone about something practical, groceries or a schedule change, and Ellison got up to deal with it, and the evening moved on into its usual shape. But before he got up, in the 2 or 3 seconds between what Willa said and when he stood, she thought she saw something change in his face. Not much, just the smallest loosening in the jaw. The particular expression of someone who has been holding something for a long time and has for a moment been told it's all right to set it down. In November, Priscilla came. She flew in from Portland on a Thursday and arrived at the apartment at 2 in the afternoon when Willa was at the library. Willa came home at 5 and found a woman in a gray coat standing in the kitchen looking at the stacked books on the counter that Willa had been meaning to reshelve. Priscilla Barr was 51 years old and had her father's jaw and a watchful quality that Willa recognized because she had it herself. They looked at each other across the kitchen. "You must be Willa," Priscilla said. "Yes, I'm Priscilla. I know." A pause. "He talks about you," Priscilla said. Willa wasn't sure what to do with this. "Okay," she said. Priscilla looked at the books on the counter. "He said you organize books by the picture on the cover. It makes sense to me. He said that too." Priscilla looked back at her. She had the expression of someone doing more thinking than her face was showing. "Can I ask you something?" Willa set down her bag. "Why did you stop?" Priscilla asked. "That day on the street, you were the only one who stopped." Willa thought about it. Not about what to say, but about the actual question, about what had made her feet stop moving when everyone else kept going. "I don't know," she said. "He was going the wrong way, and everyone could see that except him. And nobody was saying anything." Priscilla looked at her for a long moment. "He was going the wrong way," she repeated quietly. "And nobody was saying anything." She turned back to the counter and picked up the top book from the stack, the one with the whale on the cover, and looked at it for a moment. "That goes on the second shelf," Willa said, "between the mountain and the orange sky." Priscilla almost smiled. Of course it does, she said, and she carried it to the shelf. Priscilla stayed for 4 days. By the end of the second day, something had shifted without anyone announcing it. She and Willa moved around each other in the kitchen. In the evening, without bumping into things, she started describing things to Ellison the way Willa did, not just telling him what was happening, but the texture of it, the color of the light, the way things looked. And Willa noticed that Ellison listened differently when it happened, less tensed, more present. On the last morning, while Ellison was still in the study on a call, Priscilla sat down across from Willa at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, though Willa didn't drink coffee. I owe you an apology, Priscilla said, for the phone call in October. You weren't talking to me, Willa said. I was talking about you. Willa looked at her coffee cup. I know why you were worried. It wasn't. Priscilla stopped. Started again. I didn't trust that he was doing this for the right reasons, and I should have trusted that. How do you know you should have? Priscilla looked at her. Because I watched you for 4 days, she said, and he's different. He's easier in himself. He was never easy, even before, but now she stopped again. He's learning, Willa said. Priscilla was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said, that's the word. They sat with that for a while. When Priscilla left, she hugged Willa in the hallway. It was not a long hug. It was the kind between 2 people who are not yet practiced at it, but who both agree it's the right direction. December came. Willa's backpack was on the shelf in her room. Inside it, same as always, was the folded photograph of her mother, a library book she'd had out for 3 weeks, a green stone she'd found in a parking lot, because it had a vein of white running through it that caught the light in a specific way, and a pair of socks with a small hole in the left heel that she kept meaning to ask Porter to help her fix. She kept the backpack on the shelf because Porter had pointed out on her second day that there was a drawer in the desk that locked. She could put things there. She had not moved anything into the drawer yet. She was thinking about it. On a Sunday afternoon, 3 days before Christmas, Ellison knocked on her open door. She was on the bed with the atlas open to Alaska, tracing the roads with her finger. I have a question, he said. Okay, Priscilla wants to fly us both to Portland for Christmas. You and me. He was holding his phone in his free hand, which he did when he'd just gotten off a call. That's the question, not an instruction. A question. Willa looked at Alaska, the long, thin line of the Alcan Highway, running up through the middle of all that white space. Does she want to? Willa asked. Or is she asking because she thinks she should? A pause. Both, I think, but the wanting is more. Willa looked at the atlas. She thought about the drawer with the lock. I've never been on a plane, she said. First time for everything, said Ellison. She turned a page. Canada now, vast and branching, roads that went north until they simply stopped. She called it us, Willa said. You said she wants to fly us both. She did, he said. Yes. Willa closed the atlas. She lined it up square with the edge of the shelf the way she always did, exactly straight, exactly placed. Then she got up and went to the desk and opened the drawer and put the green stone inside and closed it. She did not lock it yet, but she left the stone there. Okay, she said. I'll go.